Chapter 1697. A banknote with 50,000 taels of silver written on it was pushed in front of Wu Ben. This meant that everything was about to be settled and there had to be a conclusion. The corner of Wu Ben's mouth twitched slightly as he chuckled. "Commander Fan, are you trying to dismiss a beggar? You want me to pretend to be deaf and blind for 50,000 taels of silver? How can that be?" Fan Zhong's heart was filled with joy when he didn't directly refuse. He knew that the other party had spent a lot of money recently. He had done a rough calculation and found that it was around 1 million taels of silver. In comparison, 50,000 taels of silver was indeed a bit small. However, it wasn't that he didn't want to take it out, but that he really couldn't take out that much. Even 50,000 taels of silver was obtained by selling some of the things that Zhu Qizhen had given him. Fan Zhong, who didn't have much silver, knew that he was going overboard. He asked in a negotiating tone, "However, how much does Vice Commander Wu need? I can do my best to satisfy you. In the future, a portion of the money that the imperial court earns each month will be deducted and given to you. How about it?" "How about it?" Wu Ben directly refused. What kind of joke was this? The 5-star army was about to arrive outside the city. Who knew how long the Southern Ming Empire could last? If he wanted to wait for the monthly payment, then who knew how long it would take? Although Wu Ben still didn't know Mao Mu's true identity, he already had a feeling. He thought that eunuch Mao wanted him to lead the capital guard because he wanted to use this as an excuse to negotiate with the 5-star army. Since this was the case, he had to firmly grasp the military power in his hands. Wu Ben, who had opened his mouth to refuse, continued, "If you want me to withdraw, then take out 2 million taels of silver. Otherwise, there's no need to talk." 2 million taels of silver was equivalent to paying half of the price. From a certain perspective, it was a bit overboard, but it wasn't much. However, Fan Zhong wasn't rich. He was only a general and wasn't greedy for money. How could he have so much silver? Seeing that there was no room for discussion, Fan Zhong had no choice but to reveal a fierce gaze as he looked at Wu Ben and asked, "Is there really no room for negotiation? Apart from paying directly, there's nothing else to talk about." Wu Ben shook his head and said with a resolute expression, Good, then don't blame this old man." Fan Zhong knew that he had no other choice now that things had come to this point. He immediately threw the wine cup to the ground with a bang. Soon after, the sound of footsteps rang out. 100 executioners who had been lying in ambush rushed out from all directions, completely surrounding Wu Ben and the other two. Seeing so many people surround them, but eunuch Mao Mu's backup plans still not appearing, Wu Ben's expression changed as he asked, "Commander Fan, what are you trying to do?" "I'm the vice commander of the Capital Guard personally appointed by the Emperor. I haven't done anything wrong. You can't treat me like this." "I'm sorry." Fan Zhong didn't want to continue arguing. He admitted that he was in the wrong. However, he did not want to lose his military power. For many generals, losing their military power meant that they were not far from losing their lives. "Do it, Wu Ben. Don't blame me after you die. If you want to blame someone, blame yourself for blocking my way." Fan Zhong gave the order to attack, and the 100 executioners roared and charged forward. At that moment, a voice rang out before they did. "Oh, this place is quite lively, huh?" Following the voice, Shen Nantang, dressed in the military uniform of the embroidered uniform guard commander, appeared behind Fan Zhong and the others with 300 embroidered uniform guards. The embroidered uniform guard? Seeing the people who had come, Fan Zhong's eyes narrowed as he cursed in his heart. He knew that Wu Ben used to be a comrade of the embroidered uniform guard. Now that the embroidered uniform guard had appeared, he couldn't help but wonder if they had come to support him. More importantly, his actions today were personal and had been seen by the embroidered uniform guard. He was afraid that he wouldn't have a good time in the future. This thought only flashed through his mind. Fan Zhong fiercely shook his head and threw this thought to the back of his mind. Now was not the time to think about this. He had to kill Wu Ben first. As long as this person died, there would be no suitable commander of the Capital Guard. Presumably, for this reason, the Emperor would not kill him. He would only let him redeem himself through meritorious service. Therefore, he only had to kill Wu Ben first to save himself. Thus, Even though the embroidered uniform guard had appeared, Fan Zhong still had no intention of stopping. Instead, he continued to shout. "What are you waiting for? Quickly kill him." Fan Zhong would stake everything on a single throw. This was something that Shen Nantang hadn't expected. Seeing that the executioners ignored him and continued to rush towards Wu Ben, he shouted angrily, "Little ones, Fan Zhong is rebelling. Let's attack together and destroy them." Shen Nantang was really anxious. This mission was given to him by Mao Mu last night. He had repeatedly urged him to protect Wu Ben's safety. In fact, he had arrived a long time ago. He hadn't shown himself because he was waiting for a suitable opportunity. He wanted to let Fan Zhong make the first move. This way, even if this matter was reported to the emperor, he wouldn't be afraid. A commander wanted to kill a deputy commander without the emperor's order. Based on this, the embroidered uniform guard could use all kinds of methods. Originally, he thought that everything was under his control. He had never expected that Fan Zhong would dare to kill in front of the embroidered uniform guard. This made him turn pale with fright. At the same time, he drew out his embroidered spring saber and directly rushed forward. Wu Ben also didn't expect Fan Zhong to be so ruthless. Usually, this old man looked honest and considerate. It seemed that one really couldn't judge a person by their appearance. At this time, it was meaningless to talk about this. Seeing that the executioners were rushing toward him, Wu Ben drew out his saber and prepared to fight with all his strength. But at this time, two figures reacted faster than him. They had already rushed out with sabers. One on the left and one on the right, protecting him from both sides. They forcibly blocked the incoming executioners. Wu Ben had never had a chance to see the strength of these two people. No one wanted to harm him, so they had no place to use their strength. After a long time, he regarded them as existences to monitor him. It wasn't until now that he realized that Eunuch Mao was right. These two people's skills were really terrifying. They actually blocked the charging power of dozens of people. With the protection of these two people, Wu Ben's saber was even more skillful when he brandished it. At this time, the embroidered uniform guard also attacked from behind. Under the desperate attacks of Shen Nantang and the others, more than 20 soldiers were cut down in a short period of time. More than 30 people were injured. The development of the situation was completely beyond Fan Zhong's expectations. Originally, he thought that he could kill Wu Ben. At that time, he would have everyone put down their weapons and let the embroidered uniform guard take him away. But he didn't expect that the two guards beside Wu Ben were so skilled in martial arts that they were able to block his attack. Seeing the embroidered uniform guard rush forward, he knew that the situation was over. He closed his eyes in pain. In this battle, not only did he mistakenly underestimate Wu Ben's strength, he also neglected the other party's back. It was normal for him to lose so miserably. The embroidered uniform guard rushed forward. With 300 people against 100, the result was obvious. More than 60 of the 100 executioners were killed. The remaining 30 or so people were all injured. How should we deal with these people? Shen Nantang looked at the executioners held down by the embroidered uniform guard and asked Wu Ben for his opinion. "Let me deal with them. You embroidered uniform guard should not interfere. But Fan Zhong's matter will still be dealt with by you." Wu Ben had no intention of killing. This was not out of kindness, but because he knew that although he had subdued many people in the past 3 months, there were still many people in the capital guard who were loyal to Fan Zhong. If he wanted to replace Fan Zhong, it was not as simple as killing a few people. That way, even if there were people who were loyal, it would only be on the surface. He needed to defeat those who supported Fan Zhong mentally. He needed a righteous cause to become the commander. "Okay, then we'll do our own things." Shen Nantang nodded. Mao Mu had already given him instructions on how to deal with Fan Zhong last night. Now, he only needed to do as he was told. "Men, take Fan Zhong to the inner room. Also, gather all the family members in the manor together. Remember, don't even let a live chicken go." The storm was thus forcefully suppressed. But there were still many things that happened afterwards. For example, Wu Ben did not kill a single one of the 30 or so injured executioners. Instead, he gave each of them 100 taels of silver and let them go. Of course, there were conditions. For example, the news circulating in the Capital Guard was released by these people. Commander Fan Zhong was afraid of the five-star army and wanted to surrender to them. He called Deputy Commander Wu Ben over for a meeting. Unable to reach an agreement, and afraid that the matter would be exposed, he wanted to kill Fan Zhong. Fortunately, the embroidered uniform guard arrived in time and brought Fan Zhong to justice. Fan Zhong wanted to surrender and kill Wu Ben, but he died first. This way of dying was understood by others. For a moment, not only did Fan Zhong not receive any blame, everyone came forward to comfort him. Of course, they were also expressing their loyalty. Anyone could see that after Fan Zhong's death, the position of commander of the Capital Guard would be Wu Ben. On Zhu Qizhen's side, the embroidered uniform guard had also prepared everything. After they used the entire Fan family as a bargaining chip, the captive Fan Zhong had no choice but to go against his will and write a few letters according to Shin Nantong's request. The letters were addressed to Bugnam of Gojoseon. The general idea was that Fan Zhong believed that the South Ming army would definitely lose this battle. After seeing the situation clearly, he was willing to cooperate with the five-star army to take down Ingtian Prefecture without shedding a drop of blood. He also wrote that if it wasn't for Bugnam of Gojoseon's help at Tuma Castle, he would probably have died. He had been very grateful all these years. This letter was now in Zhu Qizhen's hands, and when he read it he was furious. He did not expect that his most trusted guard general had never truly submitted to him. He even thought that he was a loyal official. Chapter 1698. Thinking about how he had misjudged Wang Jin, then Qian Xingbao, and now even Fan Zhong, Zhu Qizhen spat out a mouthful of blood and fainted on the ground. Mao Mu, Zhang Chen, and the other eunuchs helped him up and sent him to Empress Qian's palace. Zhu Qizhen had fallen ill. Due to his anger, he would not be able to govern without 10 days to half a month of recuperation. Mao Mu, the head eunuch and head eunuch of the embroidered uniform guard, was the one who delivered the news. Mao Mu, who had been waiting for this moment, left Zhang Chen to keep an eye on Zhu Qizhen. He turned around and called Shin Nantang and Wu Ben to him. At this moment, he no longer had to hide his identity and could tell them everything. You two are the people I trust the most. Now that things have developed to this point, there is no need to hide some things from you. I am a spy that Bugnam of Gojoseon arranged to stay by Zhu Qizhen's side. My mission this time is to cause chaos in Nanming, and I have already completed half of my mission. Now that the five-star army is outside the city, they can enter the city at any time. I want to know your choice. After speaking, Mao Mu's gaze was fixed on Shin Nantang and Wu Ben's faces. Once he found that they had a trace of hesitation, he would kill them. There were members of the Langya Special Forces waiting outside the room. Now that things had developed to this point, there was no room for any accidents. Mao Mu's words were both unexpected and reasonable when they were heard by Shin Nantang and the other man. After all, they had participated in many things. They had some guesses about Mao Mu's actions. The only difference was that they thought that eunuch Mao Mu was looking for a way out in advance. Now that they knew that he had always been Bugnam of Gojoseon's men, there was nothing else to say. Of course, they agreed. As long as one was not a fool, one could see that. Nanming was about to be replaced by Yangtze. This was already the trend, and it was not something that a few people could change. Now that everyone was thinking of ways to contact Yangtze, how could they not seize the opportunity now that it was in their hands? Eunuch Mao, we are willing to follow you. Please tell us what to do. The two of them quickly made a decision, which made Mao Mu very gratified. All right, you're all smart people. One day, you'll feel proud of the choices you've made. This duke can also promise you that Yangtze will treat you well, and will also put capable people in important positions. As for now, Wu Ben, immediately return to the Capital Guard and take control of the army. At the same time, disarm the Protectorate of the Five Armies, the Divine Strategy Battalion, the Supreme Court, and the various city gates that have troops. Afterward, an imperial edict will be sent to you. Commander Shin, here is a list of names. Take the embroidered uniform guards and capture them immediately. Don't let a single one of them go. Kill anyone who resists. Mao Mu, who was already prepared, began to arrange everything. After the two of them left, he also headed straight for the Discipline Commission. He wanted to see Chen Sun, Wang Zue, and the others who had long been locked up here. If he wanted a peaceful transition in Jingdo, he needed these influential old officials to personally come out. Zhu Qizhen was sick in bed, completely unaware that the outside world had already been turned upside down. The factions and people loyal to him had all been locked up. Chen Sun, Wang Zue, and the other old officials had once again stepped forward to take charge. The five-star army outside the city was also preparing to enter the city. Once the sky was completely dark, the army would enter the city. As for Empress Qian, her heart was completely focused on Zhu Qizhen. How could she care about what was happening outside? Whenever Mao Mu came to report something, she would ask him to find the officials to discuss it. With the help of Zhang Chen, the eunuch who was in charge of writing, numerous edicts were sent out from the palace. Everything was proceeding in an orderly manner. On the 7th day of the 7th month in the year 1468, when the people of Jingdo came out of their homes to the streets as usual, they saw soldiers wearing the uniforms of the five-star army patrolling the streets. In just one night, the sky had changed. Yingtian Prefecture had been peacefully taken over. Many people didn't understand what had happened, but they had changed from citizens of the Southern Ming dynasty to citizens of Yangxie. It could be said that this was the most peaceful change and transfer of power. It was so small that the people didn't feel anything. As the master of the show, Yang Chendong was currently accompanied by Mao Mu and the others into the Southern Ming Palace. Yang Chendong stopped in front of the Qingjing Hall. "All right, this king will temporarily work here. Everyone, go do your own things. If there's anything you need to report, you can come find this king immediately. Officials, you still have to work hard. The most important thing is to stabilize the price of food. This king has brought a lot of food this time, and it will be sent to the city soon. Now, I ask everyone to open the national treasury and sell the food at a low price. In short, no one is allowed to starve to death because the price of food is too high. Do you all understand?" "We obey the king's orders." "We understand." The officials of the Southern Ming dynasty all cupped their hands and bowed. Then they dispersed. Although the new regime had been set, the personnel hadn't been set. Right now, it was time to perform well. Mao Mu also left the Qingjing Hall and went straight to the palace. At this moment, Empress Qian already knew what had happened outside and also knew Mao Mu's true identity. However, she did not shout or make a scene because she still remembered that if it were not for Mao Mu, she would not have been able to safely travel from the capital of the Northern Ming dynasty to the capital of the Southern Ming dynasty. Based on this, what right did she have to blame others? Mao Mu appeared in front of Empress Qian with his head lowered. Mao Mu respected Empress Qian from the bottom of his heart. She was kind-hearted and enjoyed a very high reputation in the palace. She had a temperament and was never extravagant. It was rare for her to add a few new clothes in a year. She had a peaceful mind and was neither happy nor sad. She had never vented her anger on people like eunuchs and palace maids. Most importantly, she was very good to Mao Mu. From the time she served the empress until now, she hadn't said a single harsh word to him. Facing this kind of empress, Mao Mu was sincerely respectful. It was just that their paths were different. Although Mao Mu thought that what he did was right, he still indirectly hurt Empress Qian. This time, he came here to be scolded. As long as she didn't take his life, he was willing to be beaten up. Alas, Empress Qian sighed as if she had released all the depression in her heart. Well, it's useless to say more now. Now the emperor urgently needs to rest and doesn't want anyone to disturb him. Can you do that? Mao Mu didn't expect that Empress Qian still didn't want to scold him at this time. He was moved. Empress, this servant will definitely not let anyone disturb the emperor and you. The imperial doctor will also come 3 times a day to take your pulse. If the empress needs anything, you can tell this servant. He didn't even call himself a minister. Just from the way he addressed her, it could be seen that Mao Mu really treated himself as a servant in front of Empress Qian. Then I'll have to trouble you. Empress Qian nodded silently. Although she didn't know what kind of status Mao Mu had in front of Bugnam of Gojoseon, she knew that Mao Mu must have put in some effort to do this. I don't dare. As long as it's Her Majesty's order, this servant will listen to it at any time. This servant will also do my best to satisfy your request. Mao Mu lowered her head. After saying this sincerely, she left. After thinking about it, he decided to talk to Yang Qindong. Even if it was for Empress Qian, he had to do his best. In Qingjing Hall, Yang Qindong was reading the telegram sent by Wang Shan. It was a report of the progress of the Yangtze cadres entering the provinces, prefectures of the southern Ming dynasty. Since the master was changed, these officials naturally had to be changed. If they were really capable, they would be gathered together to learn and finally be distributed. If they were not capable, they would be given some money to send them away. At this moment, Yang Qindong couldn't be soft-hearted at all. Otherwise, some things would only be more troublesome to solve in the future. Young master, eunuch Mao Mu is outside the hall. Beta Persei walked into the hall and reported softly. Let him in. Yang Qindong nodded, then handed a telegram to Yang Bo, who was sitting next to him. Bo, take a look at this first. Father has a question for you later. Yes, father. Yang Bo nodded respectfully. It was said that reading 10,000 books was not as good as traveling 10,000 miles. Along the way, Yang Bo followed his father Yang Qindong and saw a lot of things that were not recorded in books. He also learned a lot of knowledge that was not recorded in books. At this moment, he was like a sponge, constantly learning and accumulating his own energy. Mao Mu walked into the hall and knelt in front of Yang Qindong with a plop. Long live your majesty. Mao Mu, there's no need for such a big ceremony. Get up and talk. Yang Qindong straightened his body and then looked with interest at Mao Mu, who was slowly standing up in the middle of the hall. Yang Qindong didn't have a good impression of eunuchs, but he didn't hate them either, because they were a very pitiful group. No matter the reason, it was a very sad thing to become neither male nor female. Often, even if they fought among themselves, it was just to survive or to live a better life. What was wrong with that? Everyone had the right to pursue a better life, right? But understanding was one thing. Yang Qindong didn't like to have such people around him, so he had long decided that he would not use eunuchs in his regime. There were also palace maids who were strong. They could replace eunuchs to do what they should do. This was also the reason why there were never any eunuchs in the palace. Of course, one of the reasons why he made this decision was because Yang Qindong wanted to lead the Han people to become strong and prosperous, to reach the peak of the world. Oh, if he turned some of the Han people into eunuchs, wouldn't that go against his original intention? As for not using the Han people and using other races, there was no need to consider. As long as they had the slightest bit of ability, Yang Qindong would not let the other races raise their heads. Why would he take the initiative to raise their social status? Chapter 1699. The decision to not use eunuchs had been made long ago. People like Mao Mu became the last batch of eunuchs. Yang Qindong had to consider whether he should stay or go. After all, Mao Mu was a meritorious official. Without his efforts, the conquest of the southern Ming Empire would not have gone so smoothly. Yang Qindong was still clear on this point. Thank you, Your Majesty. Mao Mu stood up and raised his head. But as soon as he saw Yang Qindong looking at him with a deep gaze, he felt a lot of pressure. This time, seeing Yang Qindong was completely different from 10 years ago. At this time, Yang Qindong was dignified without being angry. His entire body was filled with a domineering and kingly aura. How could ordinary people dare to look him in the eye? First, he calmed down his complicated emotions. After making up his mind, Mao Mu finally said, Your Majesty, how are you going to treat Yingzhong and Empress Qian? After hearing this, Yang Qindong looked displeased. How to deal with others was Yang Qindong's right. Whether it was to kill, release, or even bury them, it was not something that others could question. Even the few servants of the Yang family did not dare to test Yang Qindong's attitude on such matters. Although Mao Mu had made a great contribution, it was absolutely impossible to say that he had such ability. Merit was merit and fault was fault. Yang Qindong was particular about distinguishing right from wrong. He did not believe that Mao Mu could not see that. If he did not have such ability, It would be impossible for him to stand tall in the palace for so many years. However, Mao Mu still came and emphasized the words Empress Qian in the question. His meaning was very obvious. He wanted to know how Yang Chendong would treat Empress Qian, so much so that he would rather risk being punished. Yang Chendong replied with a grunt, his face showing displeasure. Beta Persei, who was standing at the side, had already angrily rebuked, "Eunuch Mao, you've gone too far." This was Mao Mu's great contribution. If it were anyone else, they would have been dragged out by Beta Persei. "Yes, I've gone too far. However, Empress Qian has treated me well. If your Majesty really wants to kill her, I'll be bold enough to ask to be buried with her." Mao Mu's face was calm. Although it was said to be bold, anyone could see that at this time, he was determined to help Empress Qian fight for something. "You really have guts." Yang Heir became even angrier when he heard these words. He glared at Lin Fan as though he wanted to eat him alive. Enough. On the other hand, Yang Chendong didn't seem to be so angry anymore. He waved his hand at Second Yang, then looked at Mao Mu and said, "Are you threatening me? Do you think your Majesty doesn't dare to touch you because you've just made a great contribution?" After a few words, Mao Mu knelt on the ground again. Then he kept kowtowing while saying, "Your Majesty, I don't dare. I only want to repay Empress Qian for taking care of me all these years. Now that the Southern Ming Empire is owned by Yang Xie, they are no longer a threat. Please, Your Majesty, spare their lives." Of course, Mao Mu knew the consequences of his actions, but he still did it. That could only mean one thing. He was really a sentimental person. In order to repay Empress Qian's kindness, he was willing to bet his future, even his life. From this point of view, his actions were very admirable. As for this, wasn't it an act of kindness? A person who knew how to repay kindness wouldn't have a bad heart. Yang Chendong thought that he wouldn't use eunuchs, nor would he allow such a group to appear. Mao Mu's arrangement was very problematic, and he couldn't not arrange for people who had made meritorious contributions. Otherwise, it would easily disappoint others. Now that Mao Mu had made such a request, why didn't he take the opportunity to give them a chance? No matter what, Zhu Yuanzhang had defeated the Yuan dynasty and led the Han people to become the ruler of the world. He had made meritorious contributions. His descendants should also receive some of his blessings. In an instant, Yang Chendong thought of a way to solve the problem. He looked at Mao Mu, who was still kowtowing, and said, "All right, there's no need to kowtow anymore. If you injure yourself, who will serve Empress Qian?" Mao Mu was immediately stunned. Then, as if he thought of something, he said with a face full of joy, "Your Majesty is willing to spare their lives? This prince has never thought of killing them. After all, they are a part of the Han people. Even if you didn't plead for mercy, this prince would only lock them up and send them to a special department to take care of them. But since a meritorious person like you has spoken, this prince has decided not to lock them up. They can go out and look around. When the time comes, this prince will send troops to protect them and let them travel the mountains of our Han people. Thinking about it, this prince is a bit envious of them." When Mao Mu heard this, he also looked forward to it. The result of this plea was completely out of his expectations. Not only would they not be killed, they would also be able to obtain freedom. Although they would lose their power, this was undoubtedly the best result for a loser, wasn't it? At the very least, no victor would treat a loser like Yang Chendong and give them a certain amount of freedom. Thinking that this was likely the result of his pleading, Mao Mu immediately kowtowed and shouted, "This servant represents Ingzong and Empress Qian to thank your Majesty for your kindness. There's no need to thank me yet. This prince still has a few conditions that need to be agreed to first." "Yes, your Majesty, please tell me." Mao Mu replied with a serious expression. First, freedom is limited to Ingzong and Empress Qian. As for the other people in the palace, including the heirs of the imperial family, they will all be demoted to commoners. They will be moved to other regions and live in secret. In the future, they will not be allowed to mention their origins. If they are discovered, they will be killed without mercy. Second, Ingzong will take the initiative to abdicate the throne to shut the mouths of the people. Third, Mao Mu, you will accompany them until they die of old age or until the day you die first. And if Zhu Qizhen still has other thoughts during this process, not only will you die, but all of his children and concubines who are wandering outside will die as well. There are only 3 conditions. After you think it over, you can reply to this prince. After Yang Chendong stated his 3 conditions, he waved his hand. These conditions were not something that Mao Mu could agree to. It needed Yingzong and Zhu Qizhen to agree to it. Of course, if the other party did not agree, then sorry. The opportunity was given to you, but you did not grasp it. Then you can go live in the king's tomb in Crimson Nest City. There are many old friends there and perhaps you can find common ground with them. Mao Mu left. Yang Bo, who was looking at the various telegrams, put down the telegram in his hand and looked at Yang Chendong with a face full of curiosity. Lord Father, it is said that the winner is king and the loser is a bandit. You can just lock them up to prevent any future troubles. Why do you have to go through all this trouble? Bo is right. This proves that you have thought about this matter. As you said, locking them up is the simplest and most effective way to deal with them. It is just like how we deal with other countries and powers. Facts have proven that the results are not bad. However, Zhu Qizhen is the emperor of the great Ming dynasty. The people under his rule are all Han. If we do not want the Han to suffer any losses, we must be flexible. Regardless of whether it is dealing with the Southern Ming dynasty or the Bai Ming dynasty, we cannot deal with them the same way we deal with the other foreign races. This way, we will only weaken our own strength. If we want the Han to rule the world, the most important thing is population. This requires a large number of people to unify the world. Based on this requirement, we must be extremely careful when dealing with matters related to Yingzong. Even if it is more troublesome, we can obtain more Han people's support and population. No matter how you look at it, it is worth it. There are many benefits to this method. For example, Mao Mu's relationship as ruler and vassal will be preserved. For example, it will set an example for the Bai Ming dynasty that has yet to be conquered. This will have a great effect on the subsequent conquest of that place. If we can subdue them without fighting and obtain the Bai Ming dynasty without conquering them, the significance will be even greater. There is one more thing that we cannot ignore. After all, the Zhou clan has ruled the Han dynasty for many years. There are still many people who support them and are willing to pledge their loyalty to them. Speaking to this point, Yang Chendong thought about the history of the Ming dynasty. After the Zhenfu dynasty entered the Great Ming dynasty, the so-called anti-Qing and restoring the Ming dynasty continued for over 100 years. If this matter was not resolved properly, the same thing might happen to him. He said with a more confident tone, resolving Yingzong's problem is the same as resolving a lot of problems in the future. This way, we can focus more on development and construction instead of quelling the rebellion. No matter how you look at it, it will be worth it. Yang Chendong said so much in one breath. Yang Bo listened to everything before he finished. However, he still nodded. All right, father. Bo, I will remember your words. I will slowly think about it when I return. If there is something that I can't figure out, I will ask father. All right, Bo, I can ask father if there is anything that you don't understand. Yang Chendong patted Yang Bo's head with satisfaction. He hoped that his son would grow up quickly so that he could retire earlier. To be honest, he also wanted to be like Yingzong and walk around. He did not want to be locked up in the palace and deal with all kinds of things. That kind of life was too monotonous. Bai Ming Dynasty Imperial Palace. The capital of the Southern Ming Dynasty had been taken down by Yang Chendong without shedding a drop of blood. After hearing the news, the Daizong, Zhu Qiyu, spat out a mouthful of blood. Following that, he fell into a coma. However, this caused the imperial physicians and ministers in the palace to be extremely busy. Zhu Qiyu's health had not been good for nearly a year. He would spit out blood from time to time, causing people to worry. If not for the fact that there were many good things in the palace that could prolong his life, he would have died long ago. Chapter 1700. His life was hanging by a thread. One of the things that supported Zhu Qiyu's determination was that he wanted to see how Yang Xie would deal with the Southern Ming Empire. Did the Southern Ming Empire have the strength to fight back and kick Yangtze out? In the end, both sides would become neighboring countries. The descendants of the Zhou family would then be able to protect the great Ming Empire. When a person had hope in their heart, their life would become more tenacious. After waiting for a long time, the news finally came. The result was unexpected. Yangtze easily took over the entire Southern Ming Empire, and the great Ming Empire lost half of its territory. This was the worst result that Zhu Qiyu could not hold on anymore. He spat out blood and fell ill. Whether it was Zhu Qiyu or Zhu Qizhen, they were both qualified emperors. They were better than many of the Zhou family emperors in history. They were diligent, loved the people, and were willing to set an example. They were not extravagant and wasteful. They only hoped that the country would become stronger in their hands. It was a pity that they met Yang Chendong, a monster, who left them in the dust in terms of spirit, thinking, and action. They were destined to have a tragic ending. It was already a very amazing thing to be able to hold on until now. Zhu Qiyu fell ill again. The persistence and hope in his heart slowly diminished. If the Southern Ming Empire was still ruled by Zhu Qizhen, perhaps one day, Bai Ming would still have the hope of unifying the country and restoring the great Ming Empire's glory. But now, the Southern Ming Empire had become part of Yangtze. It was unrealistic to think about unifying the great Ming Empire. When the hope in his heart was completely destroyed, Zhu Qiyu entered the end of his life. With Zhu Qiyu's illness, the power of the Southern Ming Empire fell to the crown prince, Zhu Jianshan. At this time, Zhu Jianshan was already 20 years old. He had been the crown prince for a long time, but these years were not easy at all. Every day, he had to face a large amount of knowledge and study, which made him very tired. Yang Chendong's appearance changed a lot of history. Zhu Jianshan, a child who should have died at the age of 7, miraculously lived to adulthood. Perhaps there were no records of him in history, or perhaps he was not a talented emperor at all. Since the age of 12, he had already begun to resist imperial power. Deep in his heart, he wished to be a free child who could act like a spoiled child in his parents' arms. He wanted to be like other children who could run wild outside and enjoy the happiness of a child's childhood. His birth meant that he was destined to have no fate with all of this. He was instilled with the teachings of Confucius and Mencius every day, and the teachings of those who knew him well, which made him lose his youthful temperament early on, forcing him to grow up slowly. Now that his father fell ill again, Zhu Jianshan not only didn't want to take over the power, but also treated him as a filial son. Every day, he poured medicine and water in front of Zhu Qiyu's ward. He completely ignored the government affairs. When asked by other ministers, he would reply, "If there's anything, just ask my teacher. He will take care of it." Who was Zhu Jianshan's teacher? Su Yozhen was the crown prince's junior tutor and the minister of justice. From this, one could imagine what kind of problems the Southern Ming dynasty would face and what kind of situation they would face. After Su Yozhen's trip to Crimson City, he was personally summoned by Yang Chendong. He already had a certain understanding of the development of the situation. Now he held the power again. Of course, he knew what to do next. Thus, on the surface, the Southern Ming dynasty was the Southern Ming dynasty, and Bai Ming was Bai Ming. But in reality, after the Southern Ming dynasty became a part of Yangtze, the Southern Ming dynasty was also influenced by Yangtze. It was slowly changing towards a peaceful situation. Bai Ming, who had already laid the foundation, was being poured into Yangtze through Su Yozhen's hands. While the strategy of the higher-ups was changing, Bai Ming's officialdom had long become a complete mess. Ever since Su Yozhen's suggestion and Zhu Qiyu's agreement, they implemented the system of buying officials and criminals, as well as the establishment of the Zhou family bank. The middle and upper levels of the Southern Ming dynasty's officialdom and atmosphere had long become a complete mess. 70% of the salaries were deducted from the Zhou family bank. 50% of the merchants' profits also had to be deposited in the Zhou family bank. It was glorified in the name of unifying the Southern Ming dynasty's power and finances. Everyone contributed their efforts to better raise the Southern Ming dynasty's strength. It could be said that this slogan was heaven-shaking. In reality, in the beginning, the Zhou family bank also possessed a large amount of wealth, and the emperor also had usable money in his hands. However, all of this was obtained at the expense of the officials and the interests of a few tyrants. This method directly led to voices of opposition from the middle and upper levels. If not for Zhu Qiu's ruthlessness and centralization of power, as well as the colossus Yang Xie eyeing covetously from the outside, there would have been people who would have rebelled a long time ago. The officials and tyrants who couldn't and didn't dare to rebel quickly thought of other methods to solve the problem. For example, oppressing the common people to supplement their own wealth, bribing the tax officials to reduce the amount of tax they had to pay, and so on. It was that saying, the higher-ups had countermeasures, and the subordinates had policies. As a result, the ones who suffered in the end were the common people. The money in the Zhu family bank also became the common people's hard-earned money. There was also the system of buying officials and the system of buying criminals from the Ministry of Justice. As long as one had money, one could become an official. As long as one had money, one would be fine even if one committed a crime. As a result, the problem of social security was worrying. The rich became more and more lawless, and the common people were still the ones who suffered. Baiming's political situation was chaotic under this kind of environment. It couldn't withstand even the slightest bit of external force, and there was the possibility of it collapsing at any time. If Yang Xie dealt a heavy blow at this time, the power would collapse faster than the Southern Ming dynasty, and not slower than the Southern Ming dynasty. However, the crown prince didn't want to solve this problem. Instead, he handed everything over to Su Yozhen. It was easy to imagine what would happen next. Su Yozhen, who had power in his hands, immediately started to do things according to Yang Qindong's instructions. Military power, financial power, and personnel power were all in his hands, and they were all developing in a direction that was beneficial to Yang Xie. Su Yozhen had already received Yang Qindong's promise that there would be a position for him among the 9 elders of Yang Xie. Compared to the powerful and vast Yang Xie, the power of the Southern Ming dynasty wasn't in his eyes at all. The Kingdom of Spain. This was originally one of the largest countries in the West in the 15th century. At this time, it was far from being as arrogant as it was in history. On the contrary, the atmosphere in the country was bleak. This was all because their neighbor, Portugal, was about to be attacked by Yang Xie. Admiral Miguel and Curlutz were captured by Yang Xie, and the merchant Anthony was captured. When the news reached the capital, Toledo, King Enrique IV had shouted that he must take revenge. He must let the ignorant Eastern yellow monkeys know the consequences of angering the great Kingdom of Spain. However, this was only a slogan. King Enrique, who was jokingly called a useless person in history, was more interested in countless gold, silver, and beautiful women. Compared to Yang Xie in the east, which was far away, Portugal was just a place that couldn't be reached by 8 poles. Everyone was from 2 different worlds. Why should they go to the trouble of provoking him? In Enrique's eyes, the place that was more worthy of his blade was his neighbor, Portugal. How to occupy this place was the problem that he needed to consider. Spain, who had been accumulating strength, could be said to be eyeing its neighbor covetously. At that time, Spain was indeed a very powerful country. Especially after the merchant Garcia obtained information about railcars from Yang Xie, they took a big step forward in their industrial development. With a strong industrial base, it was more conducive to increasing the strength of their country, thus establishing the fact that they were a big country in the West. It was also a preparation for dominating Europe in the future. It was also at this time that news came from the Navy. Yang Xie's navy had already passed through the Cape of Sea, and their target was Lisbon, Portugal's seaside port. According to the Navy's reconnaissance, the 500 warships of Yang Xie's navy were less than 5 miles away from Lisbon. Over the years, Yang Xie had never stopped the construction of the navy, and he was also willing to spend money. After the destruction of the Golden Horde and the Ross Duchy, a large amount of gold and silver was plundered, and most of it was invested in the construction of the navy. According to incomplete statistics, in less than 3 years from 1463 to 1465 AD, Yang Xie had invested more than 500 million taels of silver into the navy, and most of it was plundered by the army. As the saying goes, 10 years of an army, 100 years of a navy. With Yang Xie's large financial investment, and Yang Chendong's large amount of information that was beyond this era, the intelligence and wisdom of the Han people came into play. A large number of warships were built in the docks, and the first batch of 500 warships was only the first batch. Behind them, there was an even larger fleet of warships, and there were also some newly built super-large warships, which were also called Class 7 warships by Yang Xie. The 500-plus Yang Xie's warships approached, and the densely packed fleet of warships rushed over, frightening the Kingdom of Portugal, which was near the sea. Although they had once thought of themselves as one of the overlords of the sea, their territory was still too small, and the number of warships in the country was only about 1,000. Moreover, most of them could not even be called warships, as they were small in size and displacement, and many of them did not even have the most basic cannons on them. After learning that almost every warship of Yang Xie's navy was equipped with more than 10 cannons, the Kingdom of Portugal was terrified, and they quickly asked for help from their neighbor, Spain. Although they had long seen the ambitions of their neighbor, now was not the time to be calculative. Enrique IV was naturally happy with the Kingdom of Portugal's submission. He knew that this was a very good opportunity to enter the Kingdom of Portugal. However, he also knew that if he wanted to annex this country, which he had been eyeing for a long time, the first thing he had to do was to drive Yang Xie's navy out. Only by restoring peace to Europe could he do what he wanted to do. Chapter 1701. Once an order was given, the commander-in-chief of the Spanish Navy, Sergi, led 400 warships to Lisbon and formed a naval battle formation with the commander-in-chief of the Portuguese Navy, Rojas. The two navies had nearly 1,500 ships. They wanted to teach the Yang Xie Navy how to behave. They wanted to tell these arrogant five-star army that the strength of Europe was far from what these Asian yellow-skinned monkeys could touch. On the Yang Xie Navy fleet, the first-rank admiral with 5 gold stars on his shoulder, the deputy commander-in-chief of the Navy, Gao Xiong, was sitting on a level 6 warship called the Big Man, looking at the sea ahead. The current Gao Xiong was no longer a pirate with only a few small boats and hundreds of brothers 20 years ago. At this time, he had become the supreme commander of the Yang Xie Navy. He could easily mobilize hundreds and thousands of warships. Under his gaze, many countries in the African region had already been trampled under their feet. Gao Xiong led the navy all the way and conquered a large territory for the Yang Xie. He himself had also become a member of the Yang Xie army because of his many military achievements. He was now a first-rank admiral, becoming the third person in the Yang Xie Navy after Yang Chendong, commander-in-chief, and Tiger's Mane, commander-in-chief. The once awesome deputy commander of the army, Leng Feng, was now just like him, a first-rank admiral with 5 stars on his shoulder. His status had risen, his power had increased, but Gao Xiong had not changed his mind. In his eyes, he was still just one of Yang Chendong's generals. Even though Yang Chendong's current combat prowess had long surpassed that of many countries, this thought had never changed. Gao Xiong would not forget that everything he had today was given to him by Yang Chendong. If he lost Yang Chendong's support, someone would replace him in a matter of minutes, and he would turn from a respected vice commander of the navy to an ordinary Han citizen who was unknown to the public. No one knew how powerful the 6th young master was more than Gao Xiong, who was the first to follow Yang Chendong. For example, the powerful cannons and guns that appeared out of thin air, as well as the various creative ideas that no one would have thought of, were all created by Yang Chendong. Who knew what other cards Yang Chendong had up his sleeves? In Gao Xiong's eyes, Yang Chendong was mysterious. And the more his status rose, the more he understood just how powerful Yang Chendong's mysterious power was. For example, there were 6 mobile cannons in the 6th grade ship that were hidden under his feet. After seeing its power for the first time, Gao Xiong was completely convinced. He didn't dare to have any other thoughts in his heart. In fact, he had never had such thoughts. After all, Yang Chendong had treated them well. Reporting to the deputy commander-in-chief, the scout ship ahead has reported that a large number of foreign warships have been spotted 60 nautical miles ahead of us. They are swarming towards us in an encirclement. A lieutenant colonel ran up to Gao Xiong and reported with a salute. There are about 1,500 warships. 1,500 ships, that's 3 times our number. Haha, but in terms of firepower, I'm afraid it's not even 1% of ours. Since there's such a big meal in front of us, how could we not eat it? Order the fleet to move forward at normal speed. At the same time, all ships check their ammunition and be prepared to fight at any time. After Gao Xiong gave the order, he laughed loudly. He was afraid that the enemy would escape and then use their familiarity with the sea to ambush him. That would be the most annoying thing. As for setting up a formation and fighting openly, that was what he liked the most. To be honest, from the time he had been in command until now, he hadn't had the experience of fighting against thousands of enemy ships. Now that he had the opportunity, of course he was happy because it meant that it was time for him to make a great contribution. The order was given through the radio, and the other ships maintained their normal formation and continued to move forward. However, in the ships that couldn't be seen, the soldiers were checking their ammunition. At the same time, the hidden cannons were revealed one by one, like a monster with its mouth wide open, waiting to devour any enemy or opponent that dared to resist. If this scene was seen by the Portuguese Navy scouts, they would definitely be shocked. Yang Xie's ships didn't only have 10 cannons, but each ship had close to 100 cannons. Even the Level 3 transport ships had 50 to 60 cannons protruding from them. All Yang Xie's ships were equipped with 150 mm caliber cannons. As long as they were fixed, they didn't need to be pulled, transported, or moved like the army. This made the caliber of the cannons much more powerful, and their attack range was up to 30 kilometers. Compared to the Yang Xie's ships, most of the ships were equipped with swords, spears, crossbows, arrows, and other cold weapons. There were also hooks, spears, axes, hooks, and other weapons that were specially used in naval battles. Only the Portuguese and Spanish navies, which had a few dozen small-caliber cannons on their larger ships, were worth mentioning. The small-caliber cannons had a short attack range, and some of them could only hit a range of 3 to 5 kilometers. Moreover, there were also many solid shells. This kind of firepower was really not something that the Yang Xie soldiers would consider. Good weapons didn't necessarily mean that they would win the final battle. However, good weapons would definitely increase their chances of winning. Not to mention, the Yang Xie soldiers were all specially trained elites. They had participated in countless naval battles along the way. Such a veteran army, with such powerful cannons and guns, was equivalent to an invincible existence in this world. They didn't know what kind of opponent they were facing. The Portuguese and Spanish navies formed a coalition of navies, and they were still approaching the Yang Xie's navy according to their previous plan. Finally, the two sides met in the Atlantic Ocean 60 kilometers away from Lisbon. Almost at the same time, the commander-in-chief of the Portuguese Navy, Rojas, and the commander-in-chief of the Spanish Navy, Sergi, gave the order to speed up and attack the Yang Xie's navy. In an instant, 1,500 ships of the two navies raised their sails and rushed straight ahead at full speed. The distance between the two sides was constantly shrinking. 15 nautical miles, 10 nautical miles, 8 nautical miles, 7 nautical miles, 6 nautical miles. Seeing that the Portuguese and Spanish navies were getting closer and closer to them, and most of the Navy's ships entered the firing range, Deputy Commander-in-Chief Gao Xiong, who was on the Level 6 battleship, gave the order to fire. Boom, 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 boom. Almost at the same time, thousands of cannons were fired, and countless meteor-like red lights flashed across the sky. It was a spectacular sight. Following that, the cannonballs scattered in all directions. Rumbling sounds of explosions could be heard as the Portuguese and Spanish naval forces were hit one after another. Some of them were directly blown into two halves, while others were blown up and sunk to the bottom of the vast Pacific Ocean. The sudden attack, the powerful cannons, after a wave of artillery fire, sank at least 500 Portuguese and Spanish Navy ships. In an instant, 1/3 of their strength was lost. This made Rojas and Sergi's eyes widen in disbelief. Just a few seconds later, the two commander-in-chief gave the same order almost at the same time, and that was to retreat again and again. As the saying goes, once an expert makes a move, you will know whether he is an expert or not. At such a distance, their cannons couldn't reach them at all, and they were completely in a position to be beaten. And judging from the power of the enemy's cannons, it was not something they could withstand. It was not an exaggeration to say that almost a single cannon could sink a small ship and make a large ship lose half of its strength. Under such intense artillery fire, how could they resist? How could they be an opponent? Unlike the Yangtze Navy, who can send orders by telegraph, they still rely on primitive semaphore to send orders. It is destined that in the chaotic battlefield, orders can't be transmitted and sent in time. Therefore, under the waves of artillery fire, except for a few Portuguese and Spanish navies that saw the new order to retreat, most of the other navies did not retreat. Instead, they crossed the sea and became the target of the Yangtze Navy's cannons. In less than half an hour, this large-scale naval battle between 2,000 warships was over. The Portuguese and Spanish navies fled at the cost of more than 1,200 navies. In the end, less than 300 navies sailed quickly to the port of Lisbon. The panicked Portuguese and Spanish navies had already lost their will to fight. They only wanted to escape to land and rely on their various facilities and trenches to resist the Yangtze Navy's attack. However, it was too late to escape at this time. The Yangtze Navy had already used the principle of steam, and its speed was not something the Portuguese and Spanish navies could compare to. Vice Commander-in-Chief Gao Xiong put down his binoculars and gave an order. Leave 200 navies to clean up the battlefield and rescue the enemy who fell into the water. The sixth young master said that now that the Southern Ming Empire has become part of the Yangtze Navy, they will need a lot of manpower to build railways and roads there. Let these people work for a while. While saying these words, Gao Xiong seemed to see the scene of these captives working in the Southern Ming Empire, and saw the moment when the sixth young master showed him. Gao Xiong's smile disappeared in a flash, and his expression became calm again. He continued, "Order the other 300 navies to follow the Portuguese and Spanish navies and head to the port of Lisbon. Tell the people below to not fire carelessly. Now is not the time to destroy them. These 300 navies still have their final value." The so-called final value was to intimidate the enemy. Just as Rojas and Sergi were about 2 miles away from the port of Lisbon, before they could even breathe a sigh of relief, a wave of cannon fire covered the entire area. The two commanders and their navies sank to the bottom of the sea. In this battle, they were pitiful. They basically did not have the chance to fire their cannons. Even if they did, due to the distance, they did not damage a single Yangtze navies. Chapter 1702. This battle could be said to be a cowardly one. The disparity in strength meant that the Portuguese and Spanish navies were doomed to complete defeat. On the port of Lisbon, the 5,000 Portuguese soldiers saw the scene of the two navies being completely destroyed. While everyone was shocked, the news was quickly conveyed to the rear. Then, the shocked kings of Portugal and Spain quickly issued an order to send land infantry to the port of Lisbon. Since they were no match for the enemy at sea, they had to defend the land. As long as they did not let the enemy land, the safety of the two countries would be guaranteed. Although they lost the joint fleet, the two kings did not feel that there was any danger. They even mocked Yangtze for only knowing how to show off at sea. If they directly went ashore after destroying the joint fleet, how could the 5,000 soldiers stop them? By now, Yangtze should have already reached the land, and the flames of war should be everywhere in Portugal. Now they were prepared. Almost all of the Portuguese army was mobilized, sending out 300,000 soldiers, and the Spanish army also sent out 200,000 soldiers. Together, they had 500,000 soldiers. How could they give the enemy a chance to go ashore? As long as the Yangtze Navy could not go ashore, how long could they last at sea? In the end, the enemy would definitely withdraw. In this way, their defense would be successful. With this failure, the Yangtze Navy would not casually attack them in the future. The two kings were still mocking the Yangtze Navy for not having the ability to go ashore and not knowing how to seize the opportunity. However, they did not know that all of this was intentional by Gao Xiong. Of course, he could directly go ashore after destroying the Portuguese and Spanish navies. However, when he entered the hinterland of the two countries, he would inevitably have to face a large number of land forces. At that time, without the help of warships and cannons, it would be difficult to fight. How to severely damage or even destroy the land forces of the two countries was what Gao Xiong needed to consider. Therefore, he did not take the opportunity to go ashore. He wanted to give the other side time to mobilize their troops. In this way, a month passed. The other side prepared 500,000 soldiers on the shore of Lisbon, waiting for him to harvest. This also proved that Gao Xiong's decision was correct. Pass down the order. Everyone, have a good night's rest. Tomorrow morning, bombard Lisbon and prepare for the landing. When Gao Xiong saw that the other party was no longer recruiting, he knew that this should be all the strength they could muster in a short period of time. Even so, he didn't need to wait any longer. After all, the sixth young master was still waiting for his good news. The Yangtze Navy had already ordered an all-out attack the next morning. Neither the Portuguese nor the Spanish army knew about this. The situation on the battlefield had determined that they would only be able to defend. They could only wait for Yang Xie to join the battle or for her to leave. Maybe it was because the Yangtze Navy didn't do anything in the past month. They didn't even bombard the shore with their cannons. This caused the armies of the two countries to have the misconception that Yang Xi's navy had a limited number of artillery shells and soldiers. They no longer had the ability to attack the land. The reason why they did not leave immediately was probably because they were in a dilemma. They had completely underestimated the Yangtze Navy's two armies and were not prepared at all. They gathered on the shore in twos and threes, chatting and talking about women. They had the attitude of a victor. The next morning, the weather was good and the sky was clear. In the distance, the Portuguese and Spanish armies were also preparing to eat breakfast. When they were about to start a fire, the Yangtze Navy moved. Under the bombardment of thousands of cannons, the two navies were caught off guard. Many soldiers didn't stay in the trenches. Of course, even if they stayed in the trenches, they didn't know the caliber of the Yangtze Navy's cannons. The trenches were still too shallow to withstand the attack of the 150mm caliber cannons. When the cannons fell on the battlefield, they quickly plowed the land. The whole land was turned over, and the so-called Portuguese and Spanish allied forces were turned into bloody corpses and buried there. Such a powerful cannon fire was the first time in their lives. A total of 500,000 soldiers suffered a baptism of cannons. Just the first wave of attack caused more than 100,000 casualties. Many of them were directly killed by the explosion, and some were killed by the powerful cannons. They never knew that cannons could be so powerful. The soldiers of the Double Fang coalition army just lay on the ground out of fear. They didn't know how powerful the remaining power of the 150mm caliber cannonballs was. Each of them was shaken to the point that their internal organs ruptured and they died. There were also many soldiers who were far away, but because of the power of the cannons, they were injured by the shrapnel. They fell to the ground and cried out in pain. Hee, prepare for the second wave of cannons, fire. Putting down the binoculars in his hand, Gao Xiong's face was full of smiles. Then he shouted again, and the deafening sound of cannons rang out again, extending towards the Allied forces. The soldiers who were lucky enough not to be hit by the cannons before were already stunned by the scene in front of them. They were still standing there with their eyes wide open, sighing at the powerful firepower of the Yangtze Navy. Above their heads, there was a wave of red light. Not good, this is a cannonball attack run. An officer of the Portuguese army shouted in fright. It's just that his voice was already replaced by the rumbling of the cannons. Apart from himself, no one could hear him. Even if they could hear him, under the bombardment of thousands of cannons, where was a safe place? After the cannons spread out, they once again gave the Allied forces a thunderous blow. More than 100,000 soldiers were killed. Broken limbs were everywhere, and countless were injured. After 2 rounds of cannons, the cannons finally stopped. The current Allied forces were already in shambles. Apart from the casualties, there were less than 100,000 soldiers left. They were scattered all over the place. If they were to use cannons to attack, it would be like using cannons to kill mosquitoes. It would be a waste. At this time, the Marines could be used, and they could directly go ashore. At this moment, the five-star army's king of the land finally made his appearance. 6 Z-99 main battle tanks jumped out from the deck of the Level 6 battleship Gao Xiong was on. They passed through the temporary iron bridge built by the engineers and smoothly arrived at the port of Lisbon, Portugal. Behind the rumbling king of the land, there were tens of thousands of soldiers from the cold front. They all carried the same Type 95 and charged towards the shore in large strides. The cannons rumbled, and the gunshots burst out. The soldiers who weren't covered by the cannons became live targets. When the Allied soldiers were still holding onto spears, sabers, and spears, they surged forward. Lines of fire appeared several hundred meters away, turning into huge meat grinders. When tens of thousands of soldiers were bombarded and shot to death, the fighting spirit of the remaining soldiers of the Double-Teeth Alliance finally collapsed. There was only one thought in their minds, and that was to escape. Run as far away as possible from these murderous demons. It was just like the scene when the Eight-Nation Alliance set foot on China many years later. At this time, the Five-Star Army's navy came ashore with unparalleled might, and the Tufang Alliance was completely defeated. Tens of thousands of Marines, under the leadership of the 6 tanks, smoothly captured Lisbon, and then chased the deserters of the Tufang Alliance into the hinterland of the Kingdom of Portugal. The advantage of firearms and years of hard training finally paid off. In less than a month, the entire Kingdom of Portugal was completely captured, and then the army's vanguard kept moving towards the neighboring Toledo of the Kingdom of Spain. In the world, not only did China have traitors, but in the face of the powerful offensive of the Five-Star Army, there were also many Portuguese and Western traitors. In order to survive, they took the initiative to become the guides of the Yangtze Army. They helped to occupy the land of the two countries and helped to plunder the wealth of the two countries. In just 3 months, the bright red flag of the Five-Star Army was planted all over the borders of Portugal and Spain. It was worth mentioning that when Gao Xiong led the army to attack Toledo, he also found a railcar construction factory here. This was all bought by the merchant Garcia at a high price from Resin City. He originally wanted to use this to start an industrial revolution in Spain. And now, all of this fell back into the hands of the Five-Star Army. As Yang Chendong expected, it was all for the development of Yangtze. The occupation of Portugal and Spain was just a microcosm of the Yangtze Navy's conquest of the West. Things like this were happening all the time. One after another, Western countries were destroyed, and one after another, vast lands became a part of the Yang family. And this kind of war would continue until one day, Yangtze's Five-Star flag was planted in every corner of the Western world. Baiming capital. Zhu Qiyu, the Daizong, finally passed away due to illness. In 1469 AD, his son, Zhu Jianji, succeeded the throne and was given the title of Hezong. It was a symbol of peace. It was just a title, and it could not change everything. Baiming's strength was rapidly weakening. If not for the fact that Yangtze was still consolidating the fruits of his victory over the Southern Ming Empire, Baiming would have followed in the footsteps of the Southern Ming Empire. Obviously, Yang Chendong did not have any intention to attack Baiming. In the 3 battles that he had fought against the Southern Ming Empire, more than 10,000 Han soldiers had died. It was enough. Now that he was going to deal with Baiming, Yang Chendong hoped to take over everything in a more peaceful way. He believed that he could do this. Zhu Jianji succeeded the throne. Although he did not like power and he did not even want to be the emperor, he was still in power. However, he was still in power and had just ascended to the throne, so he still wanted to do everything he could to turn the tide with his own strength. One of the things he did was to take back some of the power of his teacher, Su Yozhen, and personally handle the affairs of the country. Although Zhu Jianji did not show any ambition for power or political methods when he was the crown prince, no one could underestimate an emperor. However, no one could underestimate the power of an emperor. The day Su Yozhen really took over the throne, when the Northern Ming's genie guards and Eastern faction guards were completely under her control, Zhu Jianji saw the drawbacks in some of Su Yozhen's actions. He really couldn't understand how his late parents could pass such an obvious act of cheating the country by using money to buy officials and crimes. After taking away Su Yozhen's power and confining her at home, the young and energetic Zhu Jianji began a 2-year-long journey of reform. Regarding this, Yang Chendong had been watching from the sidelines. He also wanted to see what this young emperor, who had never appeared in history, would do. Would he really be able to change the entire northern Ming dynasty into a brand new state? Clearly, Yang Chendong was going to be disappointed. Zhu Jianji, who only wanted to rely on his own strength, was still too young. He did not understand the way of the emperor. Although many of his ideas were good, and he had used a few ambitious young officials, the road of reform was not so easy to walk. When it came to the interests of the conservative factions, even the emperor would be defeated and forced to leave Maiqing. After 2 years of tossing and turning, the orders from above could not even leave the capital's Shuntian prefecture. Zhu Jianji, this young emperor, was also resisted by more and more officials. At this time, Su Yozhen once again had a place to use her skills. More and more officials sought her out, hoping that she could stand up and preside over the situation. When necessary, they were even willing to lower their heads to Bugnam of Gojoseon. These people were not stupid. They could already see that if they allowed Zhu Jianji to continue tossing and turning, it would not be long before their wealth would be greatly reduced. If the reform continued, their lives might not even be saved. In contrast, if they surrendered to Yang Xie, they would at least be able to live peacefully and keep at least 20% of their wealth. In comparison, this result was much more acceptable. Under the numerous calls and shouts, Su Yozhen walked out, half unwilling. In the imperial palace, she and Zhu Jianji, the Emperor of Peace, talked from morning until night. No one knew what they talked about, but not long after Su Yozhen came out of the imperial palace, Zhu Jianji announced that he would be recuperating in the imperial palace due to his poor health. Thus, the power of the court returned to Su Yozhen's hands. As soon as Su Yozhen ascended to the throne, the first thing she did was to send people to Wu and Wang to ask for peace. She also expressed that they were willing to perform the courtesy of a subject, willing to give up their political power, and willing to let Northern Ming become one of the Yang faction's forces, a part of it. If it were 2 years ago, if Su Yozhen dared to say such a thing, he would definitely be condemned by thousands and cursed by tens of thousands. But now, not a single person stood up to oppose this. Perhaps they had already seen that Baiming had no other choice but to be swallowed up by Yang Xie. The only difference was whether they had to submit after a fight or submit peacefully. None of the officials in the imperial palace stood up to oppose, because they had always been in favor of peace. With the idea of emphasizing culture and restraining military force, it was better not to go to war if possible. After dealing with the civil officials, only the military generals were left. As a powerful figure in the Baiming army, Shi Heng had already quietly set out at this moment and came to Shi City, one of the cities built by Bugnam of Gojoseon. This time, he came to ask for peace, or to put it bluntly, he came to surrender. Marquis Wukinghao Shi Heng had already received the news that the Shaanxi army general had been secretly taken down by the deputy general Su Dai. Now this army was secretly moving towards Datong. It seemed that they were going to take Datong. As for the Datong army general Sun Hong, he was old. In these years, because Baiming and Yang Xie got along well, there was no war. The imperial palace had already cut off the other party's grain and provisions. Datong was constantly referees and soldiers, and it was no longer as prosperous as before. Once the Shaanxi army entered Datong, it was obvious what the result would be. At this moment, if Shi Heng did not make the right choice, he would not be given the chance to surrender in the future. As the saying goes, the one who strikes first gains the advantage, and the one who strikes later suffers. Shi Heng took the lead. This great general, who was the best at taking advantage of the situation, took the initiative to come to Shi City to express his sincerity in surrendering to Yang Xie. Tiger's man was not surprised at Shi Heng's arrival. In fact, he had been waiting for this moment. Otherwise, as a member of the military committee, he would have gone to Qiqian City to take up his new post. Seeing that Shi Heng had finally appeared, he could not help but breathe a sigh of relief. The man had feelings for the woman, and the woman had feelings for each other. The following negotiations were naturally very smooth. Shi Heng's request was not high. He just wanted to save his and his family's lives. He probably also knew that over the years, he had fought many battles with the 5-star army, although they all ended in defeat. However, he had also killed the soldiers of the 5-star army. Who knew if they would bear a grudge against him? He did not dare to ask for too much. He only asked for his old life and the safety of his family. Regarding Shi Heng's tactfulness, Hu Mang did not make things too difficult for him. It was still the same sentence that the young master often said. The Baiming army was also made up of Han people. They would not fight their own people. In this way, in just over an hour, it was agreed that Shi Heng would take his 300,000 Baiming army and surrender to Yang Xie. As a reward, Yang Xie would not make things difficult for Shi Heng and his family after this. He would leave half of his property. Shi Heng was very satisfied to be able to keep half of his property. Compared to other rich people who would easily hand over 80% or even 90% of their property, Shi Heng was very satisfied to be able to keep half of his property. After the important matter was discussed, Shi Heng chatted with Tiger's man while drinking tea. The atmosphere was very harmonious. Seizing the opportunity, Shi Heng carefully probed, "General Hu, may I know about the Deputy Commander-in-Chief of Shaanxi?" Tiger's man's lips curled up slightly. He knew what the other party wanted. At this time, he was not afraid that the other party would know. He casually said, "Shi Ho, you are asking about Deputy General Su Dei, right? In fact, he has been a member of Yang Xie for 10 years. Oh right, he was personally recruited by Bugnam of Gojoseon. He has always been in the Baiming army as a spy." A flash of surprise appeared in Shi Heng's eyes. He praised himself in his heart and started to rejoice that he had done the right thing. Since Yang Chendong could arrange a spy in the Shaanxi army, who knew if he had such a spy by his side? If he resisted until the end, his head might be chopped off by one of his subordinates before the war even started. After learning the truth, Shi Heng was even more determined to surrender. He cooperated with the 5-star army, and 300,000 Baiming army soldiers became captives of the 5-star army. Not long after, good news came from Su Dei. Due to the fact that Datong's general manager Sun Hong was unrepentant, he still wanted to compete with the Shaanxi army despite the disparity in numbers. After sleeping for one night, his head was chopped off by an inconspicuous soldier beside him. Because of this, the leaderless Datong army could only choose to surrender when the Shaanxi army arrived at the city gates. The rebellion of the border army had opened the western gate of Baiming Morning. After the new 5-star army commander Shi Wanshan pacified the Yuseng region and rested for a year, he led his army into Baiming. The army headed straight for the capital of Baiming. The army passed through the Xian Mansion, Huailai, and Juyong Pass. When the news reached the capital of Baiming, the civil and military officials in the imperial court were all shocked. They knew that Baiming was no match for Yang Xie, but they had never expected that the army would surrender without even fighting a single battle. In the imperial palace of Baiming, Zhu Jianji, who had already stopped his reforms and handed over his authority, did not have any change in expression when he heard this news. All of this was within his expectations. In the 2 years that he had been in power, he had always felt a large hand obstructing him, as if everything he wanted to do was fraught with difficulties. At that time, he had already predicted that this day would come. With a sigh, Zhu Jianji issued an order. Someone, summon junior teacher Su into the hall. Around 2 hours later, Su Yozhen entered the main hall of the imperial palace and saw Zhu Jianji seated in the throne room. "This subject pays respects to your majesty." It was only a bow. Given Su Yozhen's status as the emperor's teacher, it was common practice to not kneel unless there was a major event. "Someone, give junior teacher a seat." "Thank you, your majesty." Zhu Jianji waved his hand, and all the eunuchs and maids in the hall withdrew. Once there was no one else present, Zhu Jianji spoke with an ashen face. "Junior teacher, we can no longer protect the great Ming dynasty, right?" Zhu Jianji's voice was filled with an indescribable bleakness. Although he had no desire for imperial power, fate had made him a descendant of the Zhu clan. At this time, he had to watch the foundation of his ancestors fall into his own hands. That feeling was also very difficult to bear. Su Yozhen, who had long been prepared for this, wanted to persuade this emperor's student to take it easy, but in the end, after opening his mouth, he didn't say anything. He only spat out a word after hesitating for several breaths. Hearing this almost resolute voice, Zhu Jianji laughed bitterly. He already knew that he was powerless to reverse the situation. But even if he surrendered, he still wanted to know where he belonged. Junior teacher, do you know what our future path will be? This. If your majesty is willing to abdicate, you can travel the world like the southern Ming dynasty's emperor, and you won't have to worry about food and clothing. If you want to resist to the end, I'm afraid you'll have to enter the king's tomb for the rest of your life. HM? Has junior teacher been in contact with Bugnam of Gojoseon? Hearing Su Yozhen speak in such detail, Zhu Jianji raised his eyebrows and a flame of anger burned in his heart. He had long had a feeling that Su Yozhen and Yang Xie seemed to have a close relationship. Now it seemed that it was true. At this moment, Su Yozhen was no longer afraid of anything. Yang Xie was going to dominate the entire Great Ming dynasty, so there were some things that didn't matter even if he admitted it. He believed that even if Zhu Jianji knew, he wouldn't do anything to him because there was no need to. On the contrary, if he really killed him, it would only make the situation in Baiming even more chaotic. Yes, Bugnam of Gojoseon sent people to find this subject. Su Yozhen actually admitted it, which was somewhat outside of Zhu Jianji's expectations. At this moment, he asked very unhappily, "What? Does junior teacher think that we are inferior to Bugnam of Gojoseon?" Su Yozhen really wanted to say yes. But at this time, it was meaningless to say this. In order to give face to the emperor, he had to say against his will, "Your Majesty, Bugnam of Gojoseon has worked hard for several decades. In comparison, your Majesty has just ascended to the throne. If you are inferior, it is because the previous emperor didn't have a better foundation. It has nothing to do with your Majesty. In this subject's opinion, your Majesty is a wise and qualified monarch." As soon as these words fell, Zhu Jianji's expression clearly improved. Although he knew that Su Yozhen's words were obviously flattering him, he still liked to hear it. Thinking that he really wasn't as hardworking as Yang Chendong, Baiming was already full of holes. He sighed and said, "What junior teacher said is true. Even if the mandate of heaven isn't with us, we can't go against the heavens and change our fate. Thus, junior teacher should be the main person to negotiate with Bugnam of Gojoseon. You must tell them not to hurt our people, they are all innocent." Intentionally putting on an appearance of bemoaning the state of the universe and pitying the fate of mankind was the only thing Zhu Jianji could do as the emperor. At least this way, when history books recorded him, it wouldn't be too embarrassing, right? In the end, Zhu Jianji still decided to submit, although this wasn't outside of Su Yozhen's expectations. However, nothing was absolute. Before this result, he was still somewhat apprehensive. Now that everything was settled, he could finally let out a sigh of relief. He cupped his hands and replied, "Please be at ease, Your Majesty. This subject will do his best to complete this matter. I will ensure the safety of Baiming's people and ensure that Your Majesty will receive better treatment." The last sentence was exactly what Zhu Jianji wanted to hear. Seeing that Su Yozhen understood his intentions, he nodded in satisfaction. Then he waved his hand and said, "All right, junior teacher can withdraw. We are tired." In the 8th month of the year 1471, the Emperor of Baiming and Emperor Zhu Jianji created an imperial edict for Yang Chendong of Bugnam of Gojoseon. 3 years after the annexation of the southern Ming dynasty, Yang Xie unified Baiming and completely unified the entire Great Ming dynasty. After 22 years of division, the Great Ming dynasty was once again unified. The next month, all of the important officials of Baiming's Yang Xie rushed to Qiqian City to attend the ceremony. Yang Chendong set up the altar of life, worshipped the ancestors, and announced the establishment of the Great Hua Xia Empire. The word big only meant vast. Hua referred to the land of China. Xia referred to the early days of China's history. Descendants of Hua Xia was also commonly referred to by later generations. The Great Hua Xia Empire completely replaced Yang Xie and became the newest, strongest, and largest empire. 4 years later, the Great Hua Xia Empire's navy continuously worked hard to unify the Western countries. The Great Migration of the world officially began. Westerners came to the east to be slaves and servants, and Han Chinese went to the west to be masters. Other than some barren and remote areas that had yet to be conquered by the Great Huaxia Empire's army, all civilized lands belonged to the Great Huaxia Empire. The Great Huaxia Empire finally unified the world. Under the chairmanship of Yang Chendong, the new cabinet meeting and military committee meeting were successfully held in Chichen City. The cabinet elders, Yu Qian and Xin Yu, retired from the cabinet because of their age. They were replaced by the new cabinet elders, Yu Mian and Bai Shuang. At this point, the 9 members of the new cabinet were Luan Shaochen, Wu Qian, Long Tainan, Yu Mian, Bai Shuang, Su Youzhen, former Baiming official, Hu Changning Empress Hu Yan's father, former Baiming official, Shang Lu, former Southern Ming official, and Ma Dali. The military committee was expanded from 5 members to 9 members. They were Tiger's Mane, Leng Song, Gao Xiong, Tian Yu, Tian Hu, Beta Persei, commander of the Black Cavalry, Yang San, director of the General Intelligence Bureau, Yang Si, chief of the Logistics Department, and Yang Wu, commander of the Imperial Guards. After the cabinet and military committee, there were more than 30 governors. They were Governor of East Asia, includes Great Ming, the Mongolian grasslands, Korea, and Japan. Governor-General in Southeast Asia, sphere of influence includes the Philippines, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, Myanmar, Thailand, Malaysia, and Brunei. Governor-General of South Asia, sphere of influence includes Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, India, and Pakistan. Governor of Central Asia, sphere of influence includes the provinces of Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, and Timor. Governor of West Asia, sphere of influence includes Khan, Iraq, Iran, Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, Israel, Palestine, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Turkey. In addition, there were more than 20 regional governors in Northern Europe, Eastern Europe, Central Europe, Western Europe, Southern Europe, North Africa, East Africa, Central Africa, West Africa, South Africa, Oceania, North America, and South America. The governor positions would be changed every 5 to 8 years to prevent any private power from getting too big. The list of governors would be recommended by the military committee and appointed by the Great Huaxia Emperor. In each governor-general's region, there is a governor-general in charge of local affairs, such as the people's livelihood, agricultural development, urban development, taxation, census, education, and other local affairs. There is a military governor-general in charge of local security and garrison security. There is a commercial governor-general in charge of light commerce, industrial commerce, heavy commerce, and resource management, including the development and management of minerals, petroleum, and non-ferrous metals. There would be 3 governors in one region, and each of them would have the power to submit a secret report to the Great Huaxia Emperor to ensure that there would be checks and balances. At the same time, the surveillance, anti-corruption, and intelligence departments would investigate the officials in each region. If there was any corruption or malfeasance, they would be taken down without any hesitation. Because these undercover officers were also randomly transferred and changed every few years, it was impossible for anyone to bribe them. After the 60 governors were appointed, the first thing they did was to stabilize the local people's livelihood. First, they solved the problem of food. Next, they raised the Han people's position in the world. As long as one was a Han person or a Han person, they would enjoy the best treatment. For example, they would receive special treatment in education, hospitals, housing, and business. Even in terms of marriage, only Han Chinese men were allowed to have multiple wives, or Han Chinese women were allowed to have multiple husbands after they had some achievements and applied for permission to have multiple wives. For a time, people all over the world learned Chinese, learned how to write Chinese, and were proud of their identity as Han people. They suppressed other religions and destroyed other languages and books. Anyone who was found to be harboring such things would be punished. If it was light, they would be killed. If it was heavy, they would be exterminated. What the Great Huaxia country needed was a voice, a language, a history, In the end, the highest authority of the Great Huaxia Kingdom was given to the emperor, followed by the 9 members of the cabinet, the members of the 5 military commissions, and the more than 60 governors on the 3rd level. After that, as the creator, founder, and core figure of the Great Huaxia Kingdom, Yang Chendong was also prepared to let go of his power and become a hands-off emperor. In 1475 AD, which was the 4th year of the Great Huaxia country, Emperor Yang Chendong passed the throne to his successor, Crown Prince Yang Bo. With lightning speed, by the time the cabinet, the army, and the various governors knew about this, Yang Chendong had already left the throne and brought his 8 wives to tour the world. When the people of the world heard the news, they all cried. They thought that the great Huaxia emperor did not want his people anymore. Many Han people thought that this was a huge matter. It was not until the new emperor, the second great Huaxia emperor, Yang Bo, took the initiative to express to the people of the world that his father, Yang Chendong, was not abandoning his people. Instead, he was going to tour the world and observe the lives of his people closely to understand what they needed. Only then did the people stop crying and laugh. At that moment, Yang Chendong had truly won the hearts of the Han people. He had truly brought the Han people to the peak of the world. This was something that no ancient emperor could do. His achievements would be recorded in history and forever recorded in the hearts of countless Han people who were walking towards prosperity and happiness. Yang Chendong's appearance had achieved the ultimate goal of the Han people's reunion and the Han people's supremacy. He did not let down Datsong's help and did not let down the mission given to him by transmigrating in his previous life. He did not forget his original intention. When the Han people walked to the peak of the world, when other races crawled at the feet of the Han people, he laughed. It was a laughter that he had never laughed so heartily in the 20 years since he came to this world. Then this laughter spread throughout the Great Huaxia Empire and was forever imprinted in the hearts of the Han people. The end of the book. When he finished writing these 3 words, he was extremely excited. After 2 years of hard work day and night, he had told a relatively complete story. Although Longzi's update speed was not very fast, it was stable. Since the day the book was published, there had not been a single time when he stopped updating. For 2 consecutive years, more than 700 days and nights, 5 million words could be considered a positive result. Without everyone's support, Longzi would not have persisted. Although his grades had not been very good, he had never stopped working. This was the direction that Longzi had worked hard towards. Since he had started, there must be results. From 2010 to now, it had been like this for 11 years. He also thanked everyone for accompanying Longzi through this journey. In the Book of Military Supplies, there were also many people to thank. Moral Student 609, G. Pingon, L_Ray, Book Friend 587600743, Book Friend 582782001, Flame 3-inch Ding, Book Friend 26784426, Kankanshu 202, Book Friend 57762277, God Block_Killing God, 134610099964, Ba Daojiang, Dazili, and so on. Thank you for your support, rewards, subscriptions, and recommendations. With your support, Longzi will put in more effort to write every story. His new book, The Duke is Fierce, has already begun serialization on the Zongheng Chinese website. He welcomes everyone to read it and witness a new story with Longzi. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.